Good afternoon, and welcome to the joint ISO Board of Governors and Western Energy Markets Governing Body General Session meeting. Please note that today's call is being recorded, and currently all attendees are in a listen-only mode. There will be opportunity for public comment throughout today's call, and we will make sure to give you all instructions on how to make a public comment at that time. With that, I'll now turn the call over to Roger Collington to get us started.
Thank you, Silas, and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our joint ISO Board of Governors and WEM Governing Body General Session. I'm happy to say we're in a hybrid setting today. So not only do we have folks on the phone who have been on listen mode only, we have folks here in the room who we are now putting in listen mode only, at least in some way. And so let me start us out with our roll call, and then we'll start walking through the agenda. We'll start with Governor Borenstein.
Present.
Vice Chair Campbell.
Present.
Member Decker.
Present.
Chair Edo.
Here.
Member Kanzioka.
Present.
Governor Leslie.
Present.
Governor Reynolds.
Present.
Governor Shorey.
Here.
Member Smith. And Chair Wagner.
Here.
All are present, here, accounted for, and we have a full quorum. So thank you, governors and governing body members. Let me note for the record that because we're in a hybrid setting, not only do we have the public comment process that we will seek public comment over the Zoom call through Silas's assistance and having folks put themselves into the queue, but we also have a public comment box here in the room for those of you folks in the room that you can fill out a little public comment card and address the item that you want to be addressed, and then we will come to that during the appropriate time. And so with that, let's move to what is agenda item 1, which starts out with our chair welcome, and then we go into our general public comment. So turn it to you, Chair Edo.
Thank you, Roger. Welcome, everybody. It's great to see you all. We are all up here terribly excited about the launch of EDAM, and I want to just give my expression of thanks both to the staff here at the ISO and also at Pacific Core for working really tirelessly to get us ready. And I'm very excited for tomorrow's board meeting when I understand the first results will come in, and super excited. I'm also reminded that we have 2 new EIM entities joining next week. So the market is rolling forward, and it's just a very, very exciting time for us all. We have a great agenda today, very much the first one's going to be very bittersweet. We'll have to bid farewell to a couple of long-standing market surveillance committee members that I'll have more to say about that later, but welcoming 2 new ones as well. We'll also have a report from the formation committee talking about the next phase of our evolution of our governance structure. And then, of course, we'll hear from Guillermo about the commitment that we made last summer to really test out these configurable parameters for these DAMON enhancements. And then finally closing with what I'm very interested in seeing how our markets are doing, and a report that I'm looking forward to continue to bring to these joint sessions. Before I yield the podium to my fellow chair, governing body chair, I would like to take this opportunity to welcome the newest member of our Board of Governors, Alice Reynolds. We're super excited to have you with us. And if you care to say anything, this will be an opportunity.
Thank you. Thanks so much for the welcome. I'm really happy to be here. I'm joining the board at a time of so much change. Really a pivotal time for markets in the West and for really energy policy throughout the West. So I'm excited about that. I also come to the board with so much humility. I'm ready to learn. I'm ready to roll up my sleeves, and really proud to be here and share the dais with all of my fellow board members, both with on the Board of Governors and the governing body. So excited to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's all for me. Thank you.
Good afternoon to all of you actually joining us in Folsom. We have some people in the room today. That's exciting. And thank you to all of you who are joining virtually. Yesterday, I was over the top, almost like shaking with excitement about EDAM. We're one day closer. I've had a lot less sleep, so I'm still really excited, but I'm not vibrating. And I checked with Mark earlier, and everything's still going well. I haven't seen Khaled yet today, but I assume that all is well and moving forward. As each day we get closer, it's getting more and more exciting and more real to finally achieve this huge milestone for the West. And yeah, I look forward to hearing how everything goes. Um, I also wanted to just acknowledge the outgoing MSC members. I know that they're here, and we'll have that as an agenda item. But I've never really gotten to know you guys well. I listen in on the meetings and I try to follow along. But last night I heard some testimonials to you all, and it really helped give me a flavor of what you have done for the ISO and the relationships and being part of a team that has built the market to what it is today and setting the platform to where it is going on Friday. So I just wanted to acknowledge that specifically and thank you both for all that you've done and for being such an amazing part of this team. I think, oh, last but not least, Joe already introduced new Governor Reynolds, but I did want to acknowledge and welcome you on behalf of the governing body. It's nice to have a fellow regulator in the room. Andy also came from the CPUC. So we have building a deep bench of former regulators, which in my opinion is always a good choice. So welcome, look forward to working with you. With that, I will stop so we can get on to our business, and I will turn it back to Roger, who will guide us through the meeting today.
The pressure. Our next item is general public comment. And first, the way we have this year, we have reshaped the general public comment. For those that have not heard, is that general public comment is for items not specifically identified on the agenda, as well as the consent agenda, which we instituted this year as well. And the first item would be whether there were general public comment letters, which there were none. And second would be whether there was any public comment, general public comment, like I said, for either the consent agenda or items not specifically identified, either on the Zoom or in the room. We do have one in the room, but let's start with Zoom first. And Silas, if you can check and let us know if there's anyone that would like to make a general public comment.
For attendees on the Zoom, if you would like to make a general public comment, you can please press the raise hand icon at the bottom center of your Zoom screen, or if you are dialed into the phone only line, you can press #2. Right, at this time, we do not have any Zoom hands up for public comment.
Thank you, Silas. We do have one public comment that came in from the cards from Mark Smith of Calpine. Mark, would you like to approach the podium? Welcome. Good to see you.
Thank you. This is a little bit odd here. Okay. Thank you and good afternoon. I'm Mark Smith. I'm with Calpine, now owned by Constellation. We can talk about that at your leisure. It's an interesting transition. Governors, members, chairs, staff, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to chat just for 60 seconds, and congratulations to the ISO. I think a few of you might know me as a bit of an evangelist for regional markets, but my voice has been dwarfed by all the voices of other folks who see the value in expanding these markets to something much greater and better than what we have today. So my simple message is congratulations to the ISO staff and everyone else who has been involved in this transition. We look forward very much to the implementation on Friday and bids submitted tomorrow. In that regard, I can guarantee you that our 9,000 megawatts of fully dispatchable resources will be available Friday for any contingencies or problems that you might have. And Didi Subakti has my cell phone number and is not afraid to use it. So thank you very much and congratulations to you all.
Thank you, Mark. Next item on the agenda is our decision on the consent agenda for the joint session, we have one item on the consent agenda, which is the March 4th, 2026 Joint General Session minutes. And so, if I may, move that the ISO Board of Governors and WEM governing body approve the April 29, 2026 consent agenda. Have a motion, please? Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed?
I'll note that I abstain.
Oh.
Wasn't present. so I
Yes,
vote.
one abstain. Makes sense. Thank you. With that, the motion passes, and we can move on to the next item. Our next item is our CEO report. Elliot had a commitment that he could not get out of for this part of the meeting, and so Mark Rothleader is going to stand in his stead.
Thanks, Roger, and thank you. I'm on. Yeah. Thanks. So I'm going to be a little bit repetitive, but I think it's worthwhile to say how excited we are to be on the cusp of the start of the extended day ahead market, along with other day ahead market enhancements. By this time tomorrow, we will hope to have published the day ahead market for May 1st, the first day ahead market, with the extension to PacifiCorp and its customers across 6 states. This will culminate really a long period of design, tariff preparation, implementation, approvals, testing, parallel operations over the course of really more than 6 years. This work will deliver new reliability and economic benefits and will offer opportunity for expansion of the benefits already accrued from the Western Energy Imbalance Market. I want to express our sincere appreciation to the staff at the ISO and all the partners at the PacifiCorp who have committed themselves to this effort. I also want to thank the broader stakeholder community and market participants for supporting all this effort, as well as our vendors, contractors, and all the support personnel. Finally, I do want to thank FERC, as well as all our state regulators for their support and decisions and support along the way. So thank you very much for that, and look forward to unlocking the benefits of reliability and economic benefits of the EDAM tomorrow. I also want to express welcome to Governor Reynolds. It's a pleasure to be working with you in your new capacity, so welcome. I'm going to move on now to not the MSC decision, but I want to recognize our Market Surveillance Committee members who will be retiring from their positions. Today, I really have the pleasure of recognizing 2 individuals whose service and expertise have played an essential role in shaping this organization and the market we steward. Dr. Ben Hobbs and Dr. Scott Harvey. Strong markets depend on strong, independent oversight. Since the ISO's earliest days, the Market Surveillance Committee has helped ensure that our market design is sound, competitive, and grounded in the public interest. Few people have contributed more to that mission than Ben and Scott. Dr. Scott Harvey has served on the MSC since 2011, and his contributions to the ISO reach back to the organization's founding. Over decades of work across nearly every major North American electricity market, Scott has helped guide multiple market restructurings and brought exceptional expertise in electricity markets and antitrust economics. His work has consistently brought clarity, rigor, and integrity to some of our most complex discussions. Scott has been an invaluable guide to this market, and we are deeply grateful for his service. Dr. Ben Hobbs has been part of this effort from the very beginning. Since 2011, he has served on the Market Surveillance Committee and later took on the responsibility of chair. For a quarter century, Ben has helped ground this market in careful science-based analysis. His distinguished academic career and internationally recognized work in energy systems, environmental analysis, and public health have brought both breadth and depth of committees to the committee's work. As chair, Ben set a standard of independence, discipline, and thoughtful leadership that strengthened the MSC and in turn this market. Together, Ben and Scott have helped ensure that this market evolved with care, credibility, and resilience. The ISO and board, all market participants have benefited enormously from their expertise, their experience, and their wisdom. On behalf of all of us, I want to thank you, Dr. Hobbs and Dr. Harvey, for your extraordinary service and for the lasting contributions that have made this institution and the markets we serve. I'd like to stand for a second so I can see everybody, but really, thanks. And I stand to be corrected. It was 2002 that when you started up the Market Surveillance Committee. It's 2001, 2002, whatever it takes. So with that, that's the CEO's opening comments. We'll take a break and go back to Roger before going to the next item, which is the decisional item for new MSC members.
You may find this shocking, but I have nothing to say, so I'm going to turn it right back to you.
All right. All right. Well, as a result of their departure from the Market Surveillance Committee, today I am asking for your approval of 2 appointments to the Market Surveillance Committee, an institution that plays a critical role in ensuring the integrity, effectiveness, and credibility of our markets. As you know, the Market Surveillance Committee provides independent expert advice to the board, the governing body, ISO management, stakeholders, and staff on matters related to performance and design of the ISO-administered markets. Its value rests squarely on 2 attributes: the technical stature of its members and their unquestioned independence. In March, we marked the retirement of Dr. Scott Harvey and Ben Hobbs, 2 nationally recognized experts who served the MSC and this organization with extraordinary distinction. Their departure leaves vacancies that are important to fill promptly and thoughtfully. Under the ISO tariff, the CEO is responsible for appointing MSC members subject to the joint approval of the Board of Governors and the WEM Energy Market Governing Body. After careful consultation and consideration, I am recommending 2 candidates whose combined expertise, independence, and professional standing meet and, in my view, exceed the high bar set by the MSC's history. Dr. Ross Baldick. Dr. Baldick is Professor Emeritus of Electrical and Computer Engineering at the University of Texas at Austin, and it is internationally recognized for his work on power system economics and electricity market design. With a career spanning more than 3 decades, his research has focused on exactly the issues that lie at the heart of the market surveillance, at the heart of the Market Surveillance Committee: locational marginal pricing, congestion management, strategic bidding behavior, and market power mitigation in transmission constraints markets. Dr. Baldick's work bridges theory and practice. He has led and contributed to numerous research efforts on market power assessment tools and other analyses, including projects supported by the National Science Foundation. He has also worked directly with organized markets such as ERCOT and MISO, giving him deep practical understanding on how market rules, system operations, market participant behavior interact in real time. Equally important, Dr. Baldick's status as Professor Emeritus with no commercial interest in ISO-administered markets supports the independence and is essential to the MSC's credibility. His election as a fellow of the Institute of Electronic Engineers and his service in leadership roles within the power system community further reflect the professional stature and objectivity we rely on from MSC members. Second, Dr. Jacob Mays. Dr. Mays is an assistant professor in the School of Civil and Environmental Engineering at Cornell University, and a leading scholar in modern electricity market design and analysis. His work focuses on stochastic optimization, statistical learning, and market performance under uncertainty, analytical tools that have become increasingly important as our grid continues to evolve. Today's markets must function effectively amid variable renewable generation, uncertain load patterns, and more complex participation from flexible and distributed resources. Dr. Mays' research is directly aimed at understanding how market rules perform under exactly these conditions, and how risk, uncertainty, and imperfect information shape bidding behaviors and price formation. The MSC's role is not only to identify potential market power concerns, but also to assess whether market outcomes are consistent with design intent and to identify emerging structural risks. Dr. Mays will bring a rigorous, forward-looking, analytical approach to the MSC that complements the more traditional surveillance toolkit and strengthens the committee's ability to evaluate evolving market dynamics. As a tenured track academic with no commercial stake in ISO-run markets, Dr. Mays also meets the tariff strict independence requirements. His prior experience as management consultant also gives him practical insight into complex operational systems, data-driven performance analysis, skills that are directly relevant to the effective market oversight. Together, Dr. Baldock and Dr. Mays bring complementary strengths, deep experience in market power and pricing analysis, cutting-edge expertise in uncertainty and optimization, and the independence and professional stature that give Market Surveillance Committee its credibility and regulators, policymakers, stakeholders, and the public the same. At a time when our market is evolving rapidly to meet new reliability operational policy challenges across the Western Interconnection, I believe these appointments will materially strengthen the MSC's ability to fulfill its tariff-assigned role. I respectfully request that the ISO Board of Governors and the WEM governing body approve appointments of Dr. Ross Baldock and Dr. Jacob Mays to the Market Surveillance Committee to authorize the execution of contracts to fill these two seats for the remaining of the 2- and 3-year terms. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions or comments from the board or governing body?
And I want to be clear, Dr. Mays is on the 10-year track, not fully tenured yet.
Go ahead, Severin.
Yeah, I've known Ben Hobbs for the entire time he's been on the MSC, and Scott I've interacted with for most of that time as well. And I want to thank you as watching the economic analysis come out of the MSC has been extremely helpful to me as a board member. And I want to welcome both Ross and Jacob. Ross I've known for even longer, and I think he'll be a great addition. And Jacob I've only met briefly, but I'm very impressed with his work, and I think he'll be great.
Joe?
I would also like to start by thanking Dr. Hobbs and Dr. Harvey for their many years of service in support of the MSC. You know, we are really incredibly fortunate at the ISO to have an MSC. I don't believe that another ISO in the North America or internationally has anything like it, to have an independent body of really the industry's leading thinkers on the markets that we operate, to provide this unbiased and independent opinion to us to help guide us. And I really believe the strength of our markets has really been greatly enhanced by those comments, which you were incredibly thorough and educational to both myself, the board members, and our stakeholders, and really laying out where the public interest is and how it's affected by some of these decisions we're being asked to make. It's been a really important guidepost for us, and um, it's really fitting at the eve of as we move into the next phase of our markets to really celebrate your accomplishments. You have much to be proud of, and I'm just so grateful for your help. I'm also very eager to see our next crop of MSC members come in. I too have known Ross since he was in graduate school, and Mays is much younger than I am, of course, but having this kind of expertise available to our organization, I just think really lends enormous credibility and rigor to the things that we must decide on. And I think it's a true asset and a real testament to the strength of what we're trying to accomplish here. So I'm going to be supporting this nomination.
Thank you. So very soon after I joined the governing body, something that became very apparent is the things we're actually asked to vote on are extremely technical, in many cases, very complex, and just difficult to kind of take apart. Often the sort of stakeholder, the discussion in the initiative will kind of go in the direction of these sort of stakeholder issues that they're particularly focused on. And but something I often found very early on is when I was trying to figure out like what are we talking about here, and what's sort of the bigger picture interest here. I would very frequently go to MSC opinions or watch pieces of the recordings of their sessions. And I only just met Doctors Harvey and Hobbs yesterday in person for the first time, but I can assure you I've read quite a few of your opinions over the years. They found them extremely valuable to my decision making, and I know others have too. And and I'm confident that Doctors Baldick and Mays will bring their own sort of flavor to it, a different way of approaching the issues. I look forward to reading those opinions. And I wanted to second, part of what Chair Edo just said. I think that having an MSC is such a important feature of this market environment that we have and we'll have going forward, even as we go into the regional organization, that decisions and policies are developed not just through the give and take between stakeholder perspectives, but there are also these kind of independent perspectives looking at the economics, the public interest in a broader way. The MSC is very much an example of that. I think that's really something that makes me very confident that these markets will continue to be guided by good decision making. So I appreciate the work of MSC members past and future. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Any other comments? There it is. Rob, go ahead.
Thank you, Roger. I too would like to echo some of the remarks that have been made. Now start off with my appreciation for both Dr. Hobbs and Dr. Harvey. They had over 2 decades of experience before I came in on the Western Energy Markets governing body. And, it was clear of the tone that they had set. And in my experience over the last 6 years, they have been very independent. It's been very clear that when they have a perspective and they want to share, they do that very independently of what anybody individually has to say or think about it. And it's been very beneficial. They always do a deep dive. As Andy noted in their meetings, they are very patient. They listen to all the remarks. They're very thoughtful. Sometimes those deep dives are very hard to work through. And sometimes when those opinions are 30 to 40 pages long, it really makes us work. And but it's greatly appreciated because there's a great learning curve and understanding in what they are communicating. And I think they do serve us a great value. And as we look forward, the challenges don't get really any easier. There's going to be a lot of issues that will take some very passionate turns, and we need to work through those. And having MSC work through those and provide us their thoughts, their opinions, really makes a difference. And so I have great appreciation for the work that they've done. And I really wish that, I had known them even longer for the great work that they have contributed to the ISO and the Western markets. And then along those lines, we've got two new members, which I hope will be approving. I know I will be supporting the approval. I think the ISO has done a great job in getting both of these candidates, Dr. Baldick and Dr. Mays. I don't know them personally. I know of their work, and uh, I think they will be great contributors. I think they provide, Roger and Mark, as you noted, some really good diversity of thought and opinion. And I believe that they will continue to contribute in the way that we expect it. And I will support them. And I appreciate all the work that I know that they will be coming up against. So with that, thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Are there any other comments or questions in the room or online? Seeing none, we will turn to public comment. We have no public comment that have been on the card, so if you're in the room and you want to make comment, please complete a card and we can go ahead and accommodate that. And in the meantime, Silas, if you can check and determine if there is anyone online for public comment.
If you would like to make a public comment, you can press the raise hand icon on Zoom or #2 on the phone only line. All right, at this time, there are no comments in the queue.
Thank you, Silas, and there's still no comments in the room. And assuming that the governing body and the board is ready, let me know if you're not. We can go ahead to the motion. Move that the ISO Board of Governors and WEM governing body approve the appointments of Dr. Jacob Mays and Dr. Ross Baldick to the ISO Market Surveillance Committee to fill a vacant seat for a remaining 2-year term and end March 31st, 2028, and to fill a vacant seat for a 3-year term to end March 31, 2029. And move that the Chief Executive Officer is authorized and directed to enter into appropriate consulting agreements with Dr. Jacob Mays and Dr. Ross Baldick to compensate each of them for their participation on the ISO Market Surveillance Committee. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, governing body members and board members. We may move on to the next item. This item has been approved. And our next item is agenda item number 5, the Formation Committee Update West-Wide Governance Pathways Initiative. And for that, let me turn it over to Stacy Crowley, Vice President, External Affairs.
Good afternoon, governing body members and Board of Governors. I'm here again to introduce the members of the Formation Committee who have been providing us regular updates on their work. We appreciate their continued partnership and the discussions that they're having with stakeholders on the Pathways implementation. So with us today, we again have Kathleen Stacks, Evie Call, and Jim Shetler, and I will turn it over to Kathleen to start the presentation.
Thanks, Stacy, and thanks to the Board of Governors and the governing body members for inviting us today. We're excited to provide an update. I wanted to start by acknowledging the engagement that we've had from Governor Shorey and governing body members Campbell and Decker. They show up every single week to in our formation committee meetings and provide input and feedback on the work that we're doing. It's worth noting that this engagement and the partnership that we have with the CAISO staff is critical to this effort. The Pathways Initiative was designed to build on the success that the CAISO and market participants have had through the WEIM and that we anticipate through EDAM, and enabling growth of those markets and other services across the West through independent governance. As you all know, we are in uncharted territory, creating a structure that doesn't exist today and doesn't look like anything else in the rest of the country. And that puts us in the position of having to be creative and think outside the box while working within the critical foundational elements of the Pathways Initiative proposal, including giving the ROW independent and sole authority over the energy markets, protecting the CAISO corporate and financial structure, and enabling future evolution of the row, among others. We're also building on some experience in uncharted territory. The development and launch of a standalone day-ahead market hasn't been done before either, and we're extremely fortunate to be able to tap into the creative thinking of the CAISO and Pacificorp and the other EDM entities who are getting this new thing off the ground this week. We have a very strong partnership with the CAISO staff and look forward to continuing to bring you updates on all the work that we're doing together. We also have a common understanding and goal to deliver the truly independent structure that was so core to the original letter from the regulators to the West back in summer of 2023. So today we're going to provide an update on some of the major efforts we have underway, including the Row board search and the various work groups that are meeting to continue the development of content and proposals for consideration by the initial Row board to implement the Pathways Initiative proposal. So with that, I'll pass it over to Jim Shetler to share an update about the board search.
Thank you, Kathleen, and good afternoon, Board of Governors and governing body members. My name is Jim Shetler. I'm the General Manager for the Balancing Authority of Northern California and have been an active participant in the Pathways Initiative, and as also I am serving on the Formation Board. As such, I am the Formation Board liaison to the nominating committee for the new Row board. And I'm pleased to announce that the nominating committee, working with our placement firm Lyceum, has reached a major milestone in approving the experiential categories that we are looking for with the new board members. And we've identified 6 categories as are listed here that we're looking to obtain from the 5 candidates that will be selected ultimately for the board. These documents have been posted to the website. We are now in the recruitment process that's been initiated, and we're looking at roughly the next 8 weeks for Lyceum working with the nominating committee and other stakeholders to identify potential candidates. And by the end of June, are looking to then have Lyceum start working on developing the long list for the nominating committee to digest and start their process. Next slide, please. Would like to note that the outreach for candidates is listed here and is available through both the Pathways or the Row and the WEM websites for potential candidates. As far as final seating of the board, we are focused on trying to get a board seated this fall, hopefully in the September timeframe. And with that, I would be happy to respond to any questions that you might have. Hearing none, I will turn it back over to Kathleen and Abby.
Abby, go ahead.
Okay. Good afternoon, Board of Governors and the governing body. I'm Evie Call. I'm General Counsel for California Community Choice Association. And like Kathleen and Jim, I've been a part of this since the beginning with the launch committee, the formation committee, and now the formation board. And I'm going to share a couple of high-level timelines we put together based on the underlying project planner we use. But it's worth reminding ourselves again of the objectives that Kathleen mentioned. Why are we doing the things we're doing right now as a formation committee and board? And our eyes are really on independent governance, which is the key to all of this, and the sole authority of the Row over the market rules. We're trying to minimize infrastructure and costs necessary to achieve the outcomes that we're looking for by relying on a partnership with the CAISO, as Kathleen mentioned. It's a critical part of what we're doing right now. And then we're looking to set a platform to evolve the Row over time toward greater independence and a broader range of voluntary services beyond just the 2 markets that we'll start with. And the timelines are going to capture the categories of work, the work streams necessary to achieve these objectives. And again, thank you to those CAISO staff who have been critical so far in bringing us along, and we look forward to further work with you. This initial implementation roadmap depicts the three major categories of work that the formation board and then the initial board will be pursuing through mid-2028. Three buckets are the briefing book development, organizational infrastructure build out, and regulatory design, or the tariffs and contracts that will govern the relationship. The briefing book, I think I mentioned it last time, but it's a relatively new idea. It's the formation board's effort to collect background materials that the initial board will need to get up to speed on what's been done to date, to tee up key decision making that they'll need to turn their attention to pretty immediately if we're going to make 1/1/28, and where appropriate to provide recommendations on how to address some of the topics that will be in the briefing book. And you can see that the main work for the formation board before the board is seated is this briefing book. So that is what we're closely focused on right now. The second category of work, organizational build out, will include things like staffing, operations, and other aspects of operating the row as a business. And we expect this will commence in earnest once the initial board has been seated in the fall, and it'll intensify probably in the first quarter of 2027 when we expect the hiring to be done for staff. The third category is articulating the regulatory framework that's going to govern the provision of services and, again, the relationship between the row and the CAISO in providing the services. Tariff revisions and contract development are really going to be a centerpiece of the work that the initial board will have to do when it comes on in order to achieve a 1/1/28 launch date. Moving to the next slide. This slide goes a little bit deeper. It looks at the swim lanes or the work streams that are ongoing within the launch committee. And they're related in many ways to the briefing book that we're putting together. And the swim lanes here show both the work that the formation board will be doing, and further, once the board is seated, some of the work they'll be doing. The two vertical dotted lines you're seeing here represent important milestones in this process. The first, fall of 2026, is the seating of the initial row board, as Jim explained. And then the second dotted line, early spring 2027, is our target for the submission of the proposed regulatory framework. That is modifications to the CAISO's market tariff and the contract between the row and the CAISO. And I'll call your attention to just two areas here on this slide where the work streams are focused in advance of seating the initial board. And the first is stakeholder process development. We need to get to this and get something in place so that we can have some stakeholder review of proposed tariff revisions before we file with FERC. And then obviously the tariff development, while we aren't really getting into specific changes right now, it's important to start conceptualizing how this is all going to work before the board is seated so that they can be efficient and make their way toward the 1/1/28 launch. Next slide. This is just a deadline tracker that shows key deliverables by quarter, and the color coding of the deliverables is tied to the prior slide. For example, the first two deliverables here that you see in the third quarter of 2026 in blue tie back to the corporate structure work stream on the prior slide. So you can see the deliverables are related to that previous slide. And you can see that the two earliest key deliverables before the board is seated are obviously seating the board and then completing the briefing book. And beyond that, their suggestions or recommendations for the board, because that work will belong to the initial board. And beyond the third quarter of 2026, that timeline again belongs to the initial board, but we will be providing some suggestions and observations on how that work will proceed. So all the work that we're focused on right now in the next few months is really aimed to ensure that the initial board is going to be positioned to succeed with implementation in partnership with the CAISO by 2028. Any questions on timelines?
Hi, Evie. It's Rebecca Wagner. Thanks for the presentation. There was, let's see what, the slide that you have that says row implementation swim lanes. The bottom one says row evolution. Can you describe what that means? I was trying to guess at it, and it's probably better just to ask you.
All right. Well, if you think about it, the initial proposal or the step 2 proposal that we put out last year, I think it was now, a year before, contemplated an evolution from the row making market rules for the day ahead and the real-time markets, and possibly offering other services on a voluntary basis as the row develops, essentially. And indeed, AB 825 contemplated that the row would probably be adding voluntary services. The step 2 proposal had some language in it about what we called a feasibility analysis. We're now kind of calling it evolution or implementation analysis, but it has 2 components. One is, how will the row as an organization change over time in terms of its public utility status or other attributes of existence? And then the other one is, what other services might be offered? What might the market want to see in additional services, and how might those be offered? So those issues are really going to be left to the initial board to start working on. But obviously, as we're doing our pre-work here, we're starting to think about the evolution questions as well.
Thank you for that. And if I'm looking at this correctly, this starts in 2026. So has it already begun, or are you just setting the stage for the row members once they're seated to really take it on?
It will be the latter. We're thinking about it because it comes up all of the time when you're thinking about where to draw the boundary for initial launch. So we're thinking about it. There will be something on it in the briefing book, but it is not something that we're going to start a process for.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Evie. Does that conclude your presentation, or is there anything more before we go to further comments or questions?
I think we did want to, thanks, Roger. We did want to, I think, take one more moment, if we may, Jim, to speak about the funding initiative.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Kathleen. We just wanted to take a moment on behalf of all the formation efforts and appreciate the approach that the ISO is taking and working with us in looking at a funding agreement and an arrangement. And we appreciate the staff's effort and the stakeholder process that they put forward to consider that. And we are looking forward to the vote, I believe tomorrow, that we would definitely support you in moving forward with that. That would help our efforts as we move forward with creating this organization. So again, thank you for the effort and thank you for the consideration.
Thank you, Jim. Evie, Kathleen, any comments or questions from the board or the governing body? Anita, go ahead. Yeah.
So I just want to, 2 things. One, yesterday, for those that may have missed it, the governing body endorsed the funding plan that will be on the consent agenda for the Board of Governors. I think there is a lot of effort, a lot of energy towards this, towards pathways and the work that's being done. There are a lot of stakeholders across the region really engaged in Andy and I and Jan. We get the benefit of listening in on those calls and keeping our colleagues informed. And I really appreciate kind of the can-do attitude. And I know there's a lot to come and a lot of work to still be done. And I appreciate, I wasn't thinking about that it's been 3 years. And you guys are still there. So good for you. I think you're making great progress and look forward to the next 2.
Thank you, Anita. 3 years? Are you kidding? That's crazy. Before we get to Rob, let's finish in the room and
Sorry,
go. No, you're good. Go ahead, Jen.
Okay, all I wanted to do.
I just wanted to let people keep telling me Rob's up there. I see him.
Okay.
So,
all I wanted to do was second Anita's comments, because I think we should all understand these folks are volunteers, and they've been volunteering for a long time, and they are agreeing to continue to volunteer because there's still a lot of work to be done. So it's been a pleasure to be allowed to be observing and participating to a limited extent in the formation committee. They are doing a great job, and they're putting a lot of effort into thinking through very difficult issues. So thank you for letting us participate in the discussions.
Thank you, Jan. Anyone else in the room? In the board or the governing body? Okay, Rob, let's go to you.
Thank you, Roger. So I don't have a question, but I just wanted to remark, and it's going to be along the lines of what Jan and Anita said, is that every time you come here, it is always impressive with the progress that you continue to make. You know, this week we're obviously clearly excited about EDAM going live and expanding the WEIM market. And I'm hoping that we're going to be this excited in a year and a half when we're getting ready to turn over the governing body over to the row. And as Anita and Jan said, you know, great work, and we'll continue to support you. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. And with that, we check, assuming there's no more at this point from the board or the governing body, let's check and see if there's any public comment. We don't
I
have.
just briefly, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed
late in
that.
raising my hand.
At me.
At the risk of piling on, I also wanted to thank the three of you for being here, and thank you for your leadership, but also recognize that you all are kind of here as leaders of this effort, but there's a lot of other people working on it as well. And so I just wanted to express my thanks to all of the people who've been working on this, and really great great to see all of the progress and look forward to what's to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. And let me just make sure I'm certain. Any other comments or questions from the room? Seeing none, let's go ahead and move to public comment. And Silas, if you can check if there's any comments online.
If you would like to make a public comment, you can press the raise hand icon on Zoom or #2 on the phone only line. At this time, we don't have any Zoom comments.
Thank you, Silas. And we have no comments in the room. And so with that, we can move to the next item, which is agenda item number 6, the briefing on day-ahead market enhancements, configurable parameters. And before I turn this over to Anna, let me just note that we do have a public comment letter that was submitted by the Energy Authority, signed by Dan Williams, the Principal Advisor for Western Markets TEA. And that public comment letter has been provided both to the board and the governing body for our records. Anna?
Thank you, Roger. Good afternoon, Board of Governors, WEM governing body members, members of the public, and colleagues. I'm excited today to be introducing this topic. Over 2 years ago, when you all approved the EDAM and day-ahead market enhancements design, we committed, per your direction, to ensure that we carefully and closely and openly evaluated the configurable parameters of the market design. And we've been doing that, and I am proud to say that we are about to give you the last briefing before go live tomorrow. Very exciting for all of us. I would like to take a moment to actually thank also the stakeholders who actually participated quite extensively in the working groups. It was an extraordinarily fruitful engagement. I also want to take a moment to thank the ISO staff, some of which are in the room today. So I want to give kudos to them for their participation and validation of the configurable parameters. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Guillermo, who's going to give you the complete briefing as to where we're at as we finalize this effort. And I should say, finalize it for now. We will continue to evaluate and report back to you all on the state of the parameters as we enter into actual market experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna, for the introduction. Chair Ethel, Wagner, Vice Chair Campbell, members of the governing body and of the board. It's my pleasure to be here today to provide a briefing for how we completed the effort regarding the configurable parameter. We were here in March giving you a status update, how the effort was going so far. And happily today we can say that we have completed the effort as planned prior to go live to have everything set up ready for the go live. Next slide, please. The ISO committed to proceed with a working group approach to tune very key parameters that are inherent to the functionality of the extended day-ahead market and the day-ahead market enhancements. This effort started as early as August 2024, and the scope of this effort is consolidated in this list of 5 key parameters. We have one set of enforced constraints. When we're introducing the extended day-ahead market functionality, we are going to procure a new product that is imbalance reserves. Part of the key functionality of this new product is that we have to ensure that product is feasible through the transmission system. Once we awarded that, we can assure that that can flow through the transmission system for deliverability. What constraints are enforced to assess for imbalance reserves is part of the scope of this effort. The second parameter is the bid cap. Similar to energy, we have a bid cap for imbalance reserves that is at the value of $55. It is currently defined in the tariff, and we assess the implications of having that value. Through this effort, we are not expecting to change that value unless we go through a dedicated stakeholder process. We also have a default bid price. This is similar to the market power mitigation that we apply for energy. When we run the assessment, if there are structural conditions for market power, we trigger the potential mitigation of energy bids. Very similar, when we have these new products of imbalance reserves and reliability capacity, we need to have a reference price, what we are going to mitigate for. In this case, the default bid price is precisely the value that we use as a reference for market power mitigation. This is also a value set at $55 and is also defined in the tariff. We also have the deployment factor. Once the market awards for imbalance reserves, we want to assess how much of that imbalance reserve capacity can be deliverable if uncertainty realizes. This deployment factor defines what proportion we want to ensure is transmission feasible. The last parameter is the envelope constraint multiplier. This is very applicable to storage resources. When we award imbalance reserves to a specific storage resource, they have to use a state of charge to be able to support that award if uncertainty realizes and we need to deploy that capacity. This multiplier determines what percentage of that award we're going to ensure that we have at least a state of charge to support that award. This is the formal set of parameters that we scope in this effort of the working group session. Next slide, please. Through this working group, we started as early as August 2024. The last working group session was a couple of weeks ago on April 16th. In total, we have 10 working groups. In the last 6 months, we actually have once per month. And for every working group session, we receive written comments from the participants. There was a lot of interaction and feedback that we received during the sessions, as also as written feedback. This feedback was actually very useful to refine and redirect the effort of this working group. We also have a discussion with the Market Surveillance Committee about the progress that we have done in this area, and that happened back in February 2026. And just in the last session of April 16, we presented the final proposal to the marketplace, where we define specifically what values we're going to use for the go live for each of these 5 key parameters. Next slide, please. Part of the proposal consists of how we are going to implement it. As we progressed through the assessment of these parameters, we came to the realization that they have a large influence on how the market is going to function, the market solutions, including prices and cost. We also went through the challenge of dealing with all the data quality, the data availability, because this is something brand new. We don't have historical information to rely on, and therefore the simulation was the best information we could have, and that simulation has its limitations. Because of that, and given the fact that there are uncertainties we cannot quantify until we have actual operational information, we took this more conservative approach that is composed of 2 phases. The first phase is to go live. It is a moderate approach where we want to be conservative enough to ensure that there are no surprises, and if there are, we can manage the implications of these unexpected outcomes. After we have a period of time where we can assess the performance of the market and we also have gained actual operational information, we're going to be in a better place to properly assess each of these parameters. The approach is a transitional approach in nature precisely to handle the uncertainties that are due and inherent to go live with this brand new functionality. All these parameters, including the approach of these two phases, have been socialized with market participants in the last 3 working group sessions. Next slide, please. And specifically, this is the proposal. This is the setup we're going to use for go live tomorrow. We have the 5 parameters that were within the scope of the effort. The set of enforced constraints. There is a balancing act that we have to take when we determine what constraints we want to enforce for imbalance reserves. And that is, the more constraints we enforce for imbalance constraints, the more stringent the assessment is going to be, potentially is going to increase prices, and may also induce some computational efforts because more constraints makes the problem more complex to solve and may run into longer times to get a market solution. The balance point where we agree on is to enforce only base flow gates that are basically constraints that reflect thermal limitations, the limits that we have in transmission lines, on transformers, on physical equipment. We also are going to enforce nomograms, which are more complex definitions of security constraints to deal with voltage or reactive power. The piece we are not going to be enforcing at the beginning is what we call contingency constraints. These are N-1. What if we lose a transmission element? We want to ensure that the system is still stable and we manage the flow on the remaining transmission system. And we will assess how having this set of constraints enforced leads to a market solution and also the running times of the day-ahead market. The second and the third parameter that are the bid cap and the default bid price currently are at $55. They will continue and we will go live with these $55 because these are defined in the tariff. The deployment factor is going to be set up at 45%. It's relatively a conservative approach to ensure that we don't put too much stringent conditions on the market to assess how much of the imbalance reserve has to be assessed against transmission feasibility. The envelope constraint multiplier is also going to be set at 45% for imbalance reserves in the financial market, the integrated forward market. There is a differentiation because in the day-ahead market, we have 3 passes: market power mitigation, the financial market, and the reliability market. There is a value to set up in the financial market at 45%, but also we need to set that parameter in the reliability market. Given the fact that the reliability market is to procure capacity to meet the load forecast, it is different in nature when we are dealing with imbalance reserves that is uncertain because we are procuring capacity to deal with uncertainty. The uncertainty may or may not realize or may not fully realize to the expectation that we have, and that is the reason we are going to go conservative with 45%. Reliability capacity, on the other end, is to actually meet the forecasted load that we have in the system. That is more certain. And therefore, we are expecting to set that value at 100%. Effectively, this means that if we are going to procure reliability capacity from certain resources, we want to ensure that they have enough state of charge to fully support the award of reliability capacity. Once we have gained operational experience with this setup, we're going to adjust any of these 5 parameters in either direction, up or down. The time is also critical for this proposal because originally we were indicating that we wanted to have a predefined fixed schedule. After a number of months, we can move into the permanent approach. The reality is that we don't know how dynamic things are going to be. Potentially, we may be in the need to adjust any parameter sooner, given the information we're getting from every market run every day. And therefore, we want to preserve that flexibility that we should be able to adjust any of these 5 parameters once we start to see evidence on the market for the need for that. We have committed to the marketplace that we're going to do this through a transparent process. We're going to engage participants exactly as we have done so far with working groups before we pursue any changes. The last piece, it is not strictly speaking, within the scope of the formal 5 parameters that we agreed to assess, but it is also a factor that has large impacts on the market solutions. All these 5 parameters influence how we procure, how we price the imbalance reserves. There is also one other component in the market that is our target, how much imbalance reserves we want to procure. And that is based on certain logic that we have developed and socialized with the marketplace. This imbalance reserve requirements is going to determine effectively how much is going to be procured through the market and at what price. There is a way to tailor that requirement target. Originally, the original expectation was to go with the full standard risk, that is a 95% confidence interval. In the upward direction, that means we want to ensure that we are able to cover 97.5% of the probability, the percentile. That potentially can give us any range of imbalance reserves in the range of 5,000, 6,000 megawatts. In order to be in this approach of being conservative, we want to bring that value lower to ensure that we have a more manageable condition as we see the market solutions. Therefore, this value is being reduced from 97.5 percentile to 90 percentile. And also we have the analogy set up for the downward direction. We're going to move from 2.5 to 10 percentiles. These are going to be lower requirements that we're going to be setting in the market that are going to have a large influence how much we procure and also at what price we're going to procure those. Also, as part of the second phase that we are planning, once we gain operational information, this item also going to be in the scope of assessment whether we need to adjust up or down. Next slide, please. Through this effort that started 2 years ago, we have been interacting quite a lot with the different sectors of the market, and we have received a lot of information, including the California Public Utility Commission, the Department of Market Monitoring, and a lot of ideas of what else we can look after to ensure that these parameters are working properly. We have received this 10 set of written comments for each round of analysis that we have performed. In general, the marketplace supports the approach, the proposal that we have in front of you, and that is actually what we are going to go live with tomorrow. This setup was actually implemented in parallel operations for the last 3 weeks of April for providing an opportunity to the market to see how they are actually working as close as possible during the parallel operation phase. As we have discussed with market participants, there was some interest from certain participants to actually go even lower with the setup that we have. And this is not precise science, it's part of art, because on one end, we want to ensure that these parameters are set up conservative enough that we don't get unexpected outcomes and the implications of the prices and costs is too high. But on the other end, we want to ensure that these values are high enough to ensure that the functionality is still meaningful. If we come too low, basically we are muting the functionality, and eventually we have to see how that is going to work. This is the balancing act to where we landed with these specific proposals. And that completes my update. I will be happy to take any questions, comments.
Thank you, Guillermo. Any questions? Andy, go ahead.
Thank you, Guillermo. Thank you for the presentation, and thanks for all the work with stakeholders over a number of months working through these complex issues. I wanted to ask a question about sort of the balancing act you were talking about. So what would be the sort of market indications that would sort of suggest the parameters should go, up, or that the parameters should go down? Like what's the actual kind of market outcomes that would kind of inform that future analysis?
Yes, it is a suite of metrics. It's not just one single metric. Overall, is the general performance of the market, how we are procuring, what prices we are clearing for the different products, what is the interplay between the different commodities that we have in the market. And one of the key components that we couldn't assess prior to go live is based on the market solution of the day ahead, how that realizes into the real time. Eventually, we're procuring certain capacity from the day ahead with the expectation that that capacity is going to be readily available for use in the real time when uncertainty actually realizes. We should be able to now, having the full picture of day ahead and real time in production, to be able to see how that capacity moves from the day ahead to the real time, how much of that actually is being used, how much of that is actually available and can be feasible to flow through the transmission system. Measuring how much is deliverable, how much is stranded, how much the price implications we have for the different requirements that we have is part of all this suite of indices that we're going to be looking at.
Thank you. And one other question. So you kind of laid out the 5 parameters you're going to be looking at, as well as just looking at where the uncertainty kind of percentage is set. What about the kind of the even just the measurement of uncertainty, how uncertainty is calculated essentially? Is that something that would expect to be stable over time, or is that something else that could be looked at in the future?
Yes, the level of uncertainty in the system is evolving. And we have even metrics already for the real time, how over time we have to increase the level of the uncertainty requirements because the generation fleet is evolving. The more renewable integration we have in the system, the more weather-dependent generation we have in the system, and therefore the uncertainty swings can be larger and larger. So over time, we have seen and we expect to see that the level of uncertainty will continue to increase. The methodology that we use to estimate the uncertainty is quite solid. It's the same methodology we use in the real time that we will use for the day ahead. And we are able to measure how much we projected to need for imbalance reserves in advance by the time we have to clear the market. After the trading day is actually performed, we can actually go back and measure how much of that uncertainty realized, because now we have the actual information. That is a piece that we are going to be able to put together.
Anita? Oh, I'm sorry. I think, yeah, let's go with Anita. You're next.
So sometimes we forget where we started. And I can recall when this first came up and there was a lot of consternation by stakeholders that the ISO would be very lackadaisical about the configurable parameters, say that fast. And I think what we've seen happen is excellent response to stakeholders, excellent data, excellent engagement by the ISO and the stakeholders. And I really like seeing this where we're at someplace for phase 1. We're going to be someplace with phase 2 with more data. And I think data is really the key to confidence of what we're doing and confidence with the stakeholders. But I just want to do a shout out to the staff for listening to stakeholders, for getting us to this place, because last year it was not here. So thank you for all the work on that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. Joe?
Well, as always, Anita has said what I wanted to say, but I'm going to say it a different
I should have
way.
let you go first next time.
I remember when we were making this decision, there was a lot of hand-wringing because we're in uncharted territory here, and we were being asked to make this decision to move forward, and what was proposed to us was, I thought, a very creative solution, which is let's engage our stakeholders, let's all get educated around this, and let's come in with a very educated guest and be flexible about how to modify this over time. And of course, we can't substitute for the reality that we're going to see starting tomorrow. But now and also I want to just kind of also put a kind of a perspective on this of what we're doing here, which is, and wanted to thank the MSC again, because there a comment about, in the report about this is, what we're doing here is we're essentially replacing what was really, where I wrote specifically, a cautious start with this imbalance reserve can be no worse than the previous operator-directed adjustments to load forecasts. And so we are going to get better. We're doing it in a cautious way. I do have a specific question. I know you can't predict the time or how frequently you need to make these adjustments, but it's been part of the stakeholder process to sort of look at what the thresholds that you're going to look at for when you think things are needing to look at more closely. What do you have some sense of when is the yellow flag going to come? When is the red flag going to come up?
Yes. I think I would differentiate between two potential scenarios. One is a red flag, right? There is so obvious market solutions that are not aligned with the expectation of the design that we have to act quickly. And that would be a last minute change we have to make expeditiously. The second scenario is more complicated because it's a natural trend over time. And for that, we just need to accrue a meaningful sample of data to be able to see how the market is evolving and getting stable under this new structure. For that second scenario of the normal path of just assessing over time how it's evolving, I believe we will need at least a few months, maybe 5, 6 months to be able to see trends, because the timing is also critical. We are going to start with this as early as of May. That is somehow still the shoulder month, where our demands are about less than 30,000 megawatts for the CAISO balancing area, less than 7,000 for Pacific East. So it's not the tighter, more stressed system conditions you can deal with. But very quickly, we're going to turn into summer, which is a completely different landscape. And we don't want to be making decisions based on a shoulder month for conditions that may be due for summer conditions. And once we pass summer, we are ready to go into expanding the market, and we don't want to introduce noise to that next expansion. So there are a lot of moving pieces of the timing that is critical to ensure that we are doing it at the right time.
Thank you, Guillermo. And again, congratulations on a very thoughtful process. And I want to thank the participants for their involvement. We're holding hands, walking into this together.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Let's go ahead on Zoom to Rob.
Thank you. And I really appreciate the comments and questions that members Decker and Campbell had, and Governor Edo had. So it covers some of the territory I was going to touch on. So Guillermo, the one additional area I'd like to ask you about is you mentioned about the process that you would use in working with the stakeholders, similar to what you did to get to where we are today. Are there any scenarios that you foresee where you might need to act more rapidly? You just commented that you need to wait more time, you need trends, you really need summer, you need more stability, maybe after Portland General goes live, et cetera. But are there any scenarios out there where you see that more immediate action might need to be taken?
Potentially there could be, and we are ready and plan for that scenario. The idea is that regardless of how expeditiously we have to move forward, we have committed to have this open discussion with participants. We can have an expedited stakeholder engagement to be able to pursue any changes. That piece is not obviated from the need to do it quick enough.
Okay. And then this is more for the governors and members. Since you noted that we spent the last year just about getting here and the priority and the focus, and I think it'd be worthwhile for us to have a follow-up to this presentation, or at least an informational report on this, maybe post-summer, and hearing how things are going. So
Will do.
With that, thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Is there any other questions or comments from the board or the governing body? Felt like someone was sneaking up behind me there. Okay, not hearing any. We do not have any public comments in the room at the moment, so let's go ahead online. Silas, can you check and see if there are any public comments?
For those online, if you'd like to make a public comment, you can press the raise hand icon on Zoom or #2 on the phone only line. So far, we do have 2 hands up in the public comment queue. Dan Williams, you've been sent a prompt to unmute yourself.
Hi, this is Dan Williams from the Energy Authority. Chairs and members of the CAISO board and Western Energy Market Governing Body, just want to take a quick opportunity here as we wrap up in this phase of the configural parameters work to give a hearty thanks to CAISO staff, to Guillermo's team, for how we got to where we got to, as well as the outcome. It wasn't clear as we wrapped up kind of the end of the work here in April if any stakeholders were still unsure about where things were landing, so we wanted to take the opportunity to express full support for each of the parameter decisions that CAISO made. We also noted in comments that based on our market sim experience, we are still seeing a need for some additional tuning in an area that is not included in the scope of this work group effort. And that's just around the way that the resource sufficiency evaluation requirements come together, how they sort of move from a forecast into a requirement that's experienced by the LSEs that are within the non-CAISO EDAM areas. It's an area that we're still looking into. It's obviously not something that would be taken care of before go live. And we expect that there'll be an opportunity down the road when the time's right to get together with CAISO staff and express that need and figure out a way to potentially soften requirements if the data shows that that's the right thing to do. So last, I wanted to just express appreciation, as many others have done, for all the engagement that we've had throughout this entire market sim, parallel ops, and go live effort. PEA is a smaller entity, and we're providing services to entities and supporting entities that are participating in EDAM that are themselves relatively smaller than Pacificor or Portland General. And yet we have not felt throughout this process that we've been sort of the second class of entities being paid attention to by CAISO staff and leadership. We've received an incredible amount of support, incredible amount of efforts gone into solving minutia of problems that inevitably pop up in this type of an effort. And we just wanted to make sure it was known that we see how much effort CAISO has put into this and appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan. Any other public comments, Salas?
We have one more. Adam Swadley, you've been sent a prompt to unmute yourself.
Okay. Good afternoon. Adam Swadley from the Department of Market Monitoring. Chair Edo, Chair Wagner, governors and governing body members, thank you for the opportunity today to share DMM's views on the day-ahead market enhancements configurable parameter values. DMM supports or does not oppose each of the configurable parameter values the ISO has proposed for go live, and we support the reduced imbalance reserve requirement to be used to go live. However, we do note that we would have also supported lower values, and we recommend the ISO be prepared to quickly reduce any of the configurable parameters or imbalance reserve requirement if needed. The ISO's analysis has consistently shown that higher levels of configurable parameters impacting imbalance reserves increase imbalance reserve prices. However, there is not yet evidence from the real-time market to show the extent to which these parameters will improve real-time deliverability of imbalance reserves. For reliability capacity, the price impacts of a higher multiplier impacting awards to storage resources may be less, but the parameter has similarly not been demonstrated to improve real-time deliverability. All of the configurable parameters estimate the feasibility of imbalance reserve and reliability capacity awards based on conditions in the day-ahead market, but their effectiveness in supporting real-time deliverability depends on alignment between day-ahead and real-time conditions, which is not guaranteed. So for this reason, DMM would support lower values, where the ISO only considers increasing these parameters if market results demonstrate that doing so would meaningfully impact real-time deliverability, and that the reliability need to do so justifies any increase in procurement cost. DMM also supports the reduced imbalance reserve requirement proposed for go live, and like other configurable parameters, we would support an even lower level. There are a number of manual and market operations other than procurement of imbalance reserves that can address real-time supply and demand conditions as uncertainty unfolds. Therefore, DMM believes that using lower requirements at go live could protect against inefficiently high imbalance reserve prices without creating much additional risk associated with uncertainty between day ahead and real time. Just as a final note, I want to highlight that our views expressed on the imbalance reserve requirement here and in previous comments are in the context of integrated forward market procurement of imbalance reserves. However, we acknowledge the role of the imbalance reserve requirement in the EDAM resource sufficiency evaluation, which more directly impacts the amount of capacity offered into EDAM in non-CAISO balancing areas. So to the extent that non-CAISO balancing areas may rely on the resource sufficiency evaluation to ensure adequate available capacity to meet their reliability needs, It would be appropriate to allow different levels of net load uncertainty when calculating the EDAM resource sufficiency evaluation compared to that used in calculating the imbalance reserve requirement for the IFM. So this concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. That concludes our public comment. Well, I should ask, actually, Silas, is there anyone else on the phone?
Roger, can I ask Adam a question?
Oh, absolutely. Excuse me. Go ahead.
Hi, Adam Severin here. So DMM thinks that supports the lower value for the imbalance reserve requirement, but would potentially support an even lower value, which suggests DMM thinks that the new value, the 90-10, still gets the cost benefit somewhat wrong. Is that correct? Or there are more gains to be had from in expectation?
I think our view is that using a lower value in the IFM could potentially lower cost, without increasing the reliability risk. So to directly answer your question, are there more gains to be had? I think potentially. As was noted before, I think even with a very low requirement, we're no worse off than we were prior to having.
No, I get that. Have you guys done any analysis? I assume you've done some sort of analysis of how the size of those gains. I mean, the comment suggests that we are imposing some costs by even going up to the 90 level. And I'm just trying to get an idea. Does DMM think that's a big number that's being left on the table, or we're sort of from an optimization sense, in a sort of flat part of the value, the cost benefit trade-off?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very difficult to say without real-time market data at this stage. But our sense is that, it's better to start small and increase if needed instead of going the other way, right? Risk of being too large and then having to decrease later.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I think with that, Silas, I presume there's no more comments, but are there?
Nope, there are no more comments in the queue.
Okay, we can go to the next item. And that, Guillermo, don't go anywhere. So item number 7 is our briefing on market performance. We have received no public comment letters on this item. And Anna, did you want to introduce the topic?
Sure. Thank you, Roger. I'll just make a few comments before I turn it over back to Guillermo. I wanted to note that this is a first time in giving you a briefing on the market performance. Normally, we provide you an informational briefing, but we were asked to do so here in an open meeting to provide insights on how the market is performing. I will note that we're starting with where we are at today, and I expect that this will evolve over time, both from input from you all and you see things develop in the market. And of course, without mention, once again, starting our EDAM tomorrow, that will take a feature over time. So really happy to be able to have this briefing for you and look forward to the continued conversation on evaluating market performance. And with that, I will ask Guillermo to provide us our very first briefing on market performance.
Thank you, Anna. As a reference, the content of this slide is going to change from session to session because we want to bring you relevant information, and obviously it has to do with the season we are dealing with. The material that we organized for this briefing has to do with the conditions that we are currently dealing, that are type of winter low demand conditions. As we progress into the implementation of the extended day ahead market, I'm sure the upcoming sessions are going to be quite interesting to bring information on the performance of the extended day ahead market. Next slide, please. Let me start with the basics, that is regarding gas prices. In the Western energy balance market, we still have some healthy share of gas generation. And obviously, gas prices is a factor because it sets the cost of these generation resources. And in some cases, they can become the marginal resources in the system. We do have many different hubs that we use as a reference to estimate the production cost of our system. We have hubs that goes across the entire Western interconnection. We have typical hub points like Pacific Gas and Electric City Gate, the so-called City Gate El Paso, that are concentrated in the California footprint. We also have several gas hubs related to the Western energy imbalance market. And here we put a couple of those as a reference, the Somas and the Stanfield. All these are hub prices that we use every day to estimate not only the startup, the minimum load cost of resources, but also the reference bits that are used to exercise market power mitigation. The trend here shows that gas prices move quite along the same track in the Western interconnection. We have relatively higher prices in 2025 to what we observed in 2024. Historically, for the last few years, we have seen that in the first quarter of the year, we tend to see some volatility given the winter conditions. Part of our market deals with all the geographic area of the Pacific Northwest, and they are very susceptible to the cold conditions. Just as a reference, back in January 2024, we have this extreme cold weather event during the Martin Luther King weekend, and that basically shoot up the gas prices to way high levels that we have historically seen. This price alone in January somehow becomes an outlier that is a good refresher that conditions can be volatile, even though most of the time they stay on average. There are these cases where 1 month can push the market to one corner. This is the time when the Western energy balance market was a perfect tool to be able to find where the power was available to meet all the needs of the demand, moving power from the desert Southwest, from the California area into the Pacific Northwest. As a reference, we also put here the hub price for Henry Hub. This is a national reference for the gas prices, just to see relative to the national average where our gas prices are in the Western market. Next slide, please. The consequence of not only the gas prices, but also the availability of generation, including clean energy, such as those coming from solar and wind, are going to be reflected in the clearing prices. This is an aggregated trend of electric prices in the Western energy imbalance market over the last 2 years. Every bar stands for a specific region of the real-time market. And first, you can see that all prices track closely one to another. That is a good indication because we're running one single centralized market for the whole region. There will be natural differences between regions. Prices in the Pacific Northwest may tend to diverge from prices in the desert Southwest just because of congestion or different generation fleets. One item that is quite consistent here is that when you look at the prices related to the California region, that includes all the balancing areas in the energy market that are within the California geography, they tend to be higher than the rest of the prices. And that is in part because of 2 reasons. The first one is the California balancing areas are under the GHG, the greenhouse gas emission paradigm, versus the other areas of the Western energy imbalance market that do not have that. Therefore, the GHG is going to create an inherent price difference between California areas and the rest of the real-time market. That difference is reflected here. The second, but to a less extent impact, is due to congestion. Typically, the majority of the congestion happens in the California area footprint. We have many constraints binding at any time. And that congestion is going to create price separation. That price separation is also going to be reflected typically in the California balancing areas because they are closely related to the transmission constraints that are congested. These are the 2 main factors that drive, generally speaking, the price separation between the California balancing areas and the rest of the Western energy imbalance market. As a reference, we also provide the bilateral prices that are outside our market. Still, they are generated on a daily basis. They are the next day electric prices. We put a reference of the price in the Pacific Northwest, mid-C, versus another reference in the Southwest, that is the Palo Verde. In general, they track closely to the real-time energy prices produced by the ISO markets. As you can see in the last few months, they indeed converge very closely. The other trend that could be appreciated is the seasonality conditions. It is typically during this time of the year when we see the lowest prices in the system because it's winter conditions and we have moderate levels of demand. We have plenty of solar and wind production, and that is the perfect combination to basically have a condition of oversupply. Too much generation, and that is going to be reflected in lower prices. Next slide, please. Changing topics, this is an area of interest. Right now, we are going through a stakeholder discussion regarding the congestion revenue rights. We also have a discussion regarding the congestion revenue allocation in the stakeholder sphere. This is actual performance of our congestion revenue rights market. This is a market that is right now only applicable to the California balancing area. What we have here is a very key index that we track for the CRR market. This index, to some extent, measures the health of the market. On one end, we have all the money that is collected from the day-ahead market, something that we call congestion rents. There is congestion, and because of that, there are price separations, and because of that, we are going to collect an excess of money between demand and supply. That excess, that surplus is congestion rents. That is the money that the ISO as a neutral entity collects and has to distribute somehow. The mechanism that the CAISO has for distributing that money is through the release of congestion revenue rights. Therefore, the other side of the equation for this metric is how much we have to pay for congestion revenue rights based on the level and the amount of congestion rights that we release. Ideally, in a very efficient market, we expect that the amount of money that we collect should be sufficient to pay all the CRRs that we release. That is a natural balance that we aim at achieving. 100% metric indicates that we perfectly get that balance of collecting enough just to pay all the CRRs. Any value below that means that we collect less than what we have to pay. Back in 2019, we implemented some changes that we call the pro rata funding. And that means regardless how many CRRs we release, based on the money that we collect from the day-ahead market, we are going to pay only up to the amount that we collected. And that basically means we have to reduce the payments to CRRs in a proportional way. And that is how we achieve revenue neutrality. The metric that you have here is indeed showing what is the natural adequacy that we have before actually applying this pro rata funding. Interesting enough, for the last few months, we have been very close to be either revenue neutral or with a surplus. And indeed, in March, just this last month, we have a surplus for the last few years. And it is a surplus of 1.6 million. That put us in the range of about 104% of revenue adequacy. There was a change that we implemented process-wise starting with the monthly process of March. And that is, when we release congestion revenue rights in the monthly process, there is an adjustment that we apply to the transmission capacity, how much capacity we want to release in that monthly process. This is called a global derating factor. Between the time we run the congestion revenue right market, that could be as early as 4 or 5 weeks in advance of the trading month, as far as 16 months in advance when we're running the annual process, to the actual time we run the day-ahead market, many things are going to change. There will be outages, changes on the transmission system. Many things are bounded to happen between that period. And therefore, this global derating factor is a catch-all factor to ensure that we are conservatively releasing the transmission capacity, knowing that things are going to happen. It's not precise science, it's at the system level. Historically, we applied that derating only to a subset of transmission constraints, those that are thermal limitations. Starting with the month of March, we expanded the application of this derate to other constraints, such as contingencies. When you look at, in relative terms, contingencies accrue about 60 to 50% of the total congestion of the system. So we are dealing with basically a half of the transmission constraints were not subject to that derate before. Now, starting with March, all the constraints are subject to the same rate in the system. I don't want to make the correlation that the revenue surplus that we have for March is because of this, because when you see in a more granular basis, there are many interesting dynamics. We have to see for more months to come to see if this is indeed a trend that could be related to this process change that we implemented.
Guillermo, can I just, sorry to interrupt you, but you said that this change occurred in March.
For the trading month of March.
So if that were, so the only data point that on this graph is the last data point that's relevant to that. Is that right?
For that change, yes.
Great, thanks.
Yeah. There is a second metric that is quite a key index that we follow very closely since day one of the nodal market that we implemented. And this metric is what we call auction efficiency. It's still in the context of the congestion revenue right market, but the measurement is quite different. This metric is measuring two references. One is how much money we collect as the entity running the auction from selling the transmission capacity. Participants acquire the CRRs, they put a bid to buy CRRs. When they have to buy, they have to pay that money to the ISO. That is the auction revenues we collect. On the other end, when we settle those transmission rights based on the congestion of the day-ahead market, they get a payment. Ideally, in a very efficient market, we expect that the money that they pay for to get that CRR is going to be about the same money they get paid back when they have to settle that transmission right. That is what we call auction efficiency. We wouldn't expect to have an auction efficiency of 100% because the inherent nature of congestion revenue rights is to handle risk. It's a hedge instrument. And obviously, there will be risk premiums. So, but something closer to 100% would be a good indication that the market is converging. This metric is showing that the auction efficiency is quite scattered in a whole range. In some cases, it can be as low as 30, 40%. In some cases, yes, it can be over 100%. And something interesting you are going to appreciate when you see a longer trend over time is that it is typically during the winter months when we have relatively levels of congestion to be low, when we tend to have better performance in terms of auction efficiency, simply because we have less congestion to settle, not necessarily because other changes have happened in the system. And that is the circles in red that are dotted here in the edges of every year. For the last few months, you can see that we do have some good performance for the auction efficiency. In some cases, we were over 100%, but subject to the nature of the congestion, that can quickly change from month to month. Next slide, please. This is another area of interest related to the Western energy imbalance market. And it is a program that was implemented a few years ago. It was due to expire at the end of 2025. Given the benefits and the utilization of this program by many participants in the Western energy imbalance market, this program was effectively extended for 2026 and beyond. This is the assistant energy transfer. As part of the structure of the real-time market, before an entity goes directly into participating in the real-time market, they have to go through a test, a resource efficiency evaluation, to ensure that that entity on its own has enough capacity to be able to meet its own needs for demand and flexibility. Once they are able to pass that test, they can participate in the market. If they fail the test, basically they are isolated from the rest of the system and they have to meet their needs with their own resources. One of the elements that were discussed to give origin to this program is that, well, when we are dealing with very tight supply conditions, it is exactly when we need the transfers the most. So this program is addressing that concern that can we still get access to this transfer on these very extreme tight situations? And the implication is that there is an extra surcharge. Entities, different balancing areas have to explicitly opt in to participate in the program. That is a daily choice they can make. And once they are in the program, if they fail the test, we're going to still allow through the market to receive additional transfers if they are in need for that. This has proved to be very successful. It has been used in different conditions of the system by different balancing areas, including the extreme weather conditions that we experienced in the winter of 2024. This snapshot in color tells you when each of these 11 balancing areas opted in for the program, and the dark dot indicates when they actually failed the test, and therefore the program was of use for them. Now, you may see a lot of dark dots. I want to make sure that the impression is not that they are failing a lot. The far right is a summary of, on a total basis for this period reported, how frequently they actually pass the test. Generally speaking, across the board, all entities are able to pass the test over 99% of the time. That is a very good pass rate. Yes, there are cases where they are going to be failing and where the program becomes meaningful. Cost-wise, this program assesses surcharges when they are using additional transfers. At the bottom, we have some metrics of what that cost is. Relatively speaking, is in the order of $1 million for September 2025. That is the highest payment that we have for this reported period, and $500,000 for another month in July 2024. Next slide, please. Another area that we track closely is the settlements of the market. There is one specific index that we call the bid cost recovery. This is a settlements metric that quantifies how much money has to be paid to ensure that all resources are made whole. There are many different conditions in the system that may result in one resource to be out of money or because it's been dispatched uneconomically. These mechanisms ensure that they are able to recover all their costs, and therefore the reason for bid cost recovery naming. Generally speaking, it's a stable metric. You can see the trend for the last 2 years. When you look at the breakdown of the technologies where that bid cost recovery goes, about 90% of that bid cost recovery is within the California balancing area. That means about 10% of that accrues in all the remaining balancing area of the Western Energy Imbalance Market. And about 81% of that bid cost recovery is associated with gas resources. This is expected. These are the resources that typically have to be dispatched uneconomically given the temporal nature of the constraints they have. In some cases, they have to be dispatched in the middle of the day to be able to ensure that they are ready to be able to ramp through the evening. And therefore, in some instances, in some periods of the day, they are going to be running out of money. And these mechanisms ensure they are made whole. Another element of interest that we have been continuously discussing in the policy space is the implications that this mechanism has for storage resources. Storage resources are also part of this bid cost recovery. And overall, for this reported period, they count for about 8% of the total bid cost recovery. There are very active discussions about the bid cost recovery related to storage resources. Next slide, please. Lastly, this is also a metric that is very relevant to the time of the year we are dealing with. Anywhere in the shoulder months between February, March, all the way through May and June, there is a very characteristic trend that we see in our system. We have very mild levels of demand, under 25 gigawatts of peak demand when we are growing the production of renewable resources because now we have longer days. This combination of low demand and high penetration of renewable resources give rise to oversupply, too much generation in the system in the middle of the day, to the point that at some extent we cannot accommodate all that generation. That is what we have historically called energy curtailment. Now, the term curtailment has some connotation that makes sense when we were starting to track this, when all renewable resources were basically self-scheduling, not wanting to be moved based on economics. As of now, the majority of renewable resources are actively and economically participating in our market with economic bids. And therefore, any movement from the natural production is no more than a natural redispatch of a market, no different to what we do for any other type of technology. When we have to reduce generation from a renewable resource from the point where they can naturally produce, that is what we call an energy reduction, an energy curtailment. It could be mainly because of two reasons. We have just too much generation in the system, or we have to deal with congestion. And congestion simply means we have to increase generation on some resources while we have to decrease generation on other resources. And this is part of the explanation why we see this increasing trend of energy reductions. As we have more and more penetration of renewable resources, they are the generation mix that is available in the system, and therefore when we have to deal with congestion management, they are the resources that have to be redispatched. There are no other resources to redispatch, and therefore they can be reduced because of congestion. As you can see, for the month of March, the level of energy reductions have leveled off. I would like to wait to see how April and May looks like to see if indeed has leveled off for this year, because this can change very quickly. The other component is the type of technology that is behind these reductions. 94% of all the energy reductions are related to solar, because the majority of the renewable resources that we have in the system are solar. That completes my briefing. Happy to take on any questions you may have.
Thank you, Guillermo. Any questions for Guillermo? I'm going to start with Rob. I see he's got his hand up. He was fast this time.
Thank you, Roger. Guillermo, thank you for this presentation. And I'd like to at least first start off with Anna and thanking for this presentation being included. I've always had a lot of questions on the market performance reports, and it's just a little cumbersome to do that at the very end when we've already exceeded our time or come to the end of the meeting. And so having this as part of the body, I think, is helpful. And Guillermo, your clarifications of this information, very eloquent and really answers most of my questions. But I have one question and one comment. Let me start with a comment, and that is on that slide 36, the last item you were touching on, the renewable energy reduction. I know I've asked you questions over the last 6 years, at least once a year, probably more than that. And this is really helpful. Seeing this difference between oversupply, congestion, really has a lot of, it's very enlightening. I know that there's a lot of people looking at this as well. I know I have seen comments in the Friday Burrito on this subject, and I think this really goes a long ways to really understanding further what's happening with the renewable energy and why we've seen what we've seen. So thank you for including this. This was I'm just pleased to see this information. The other item, which is a question, and again, this may be a bit unfair because this goes to your last report to us at the last meeting. And this is on the subject of the pilot program on load conformance. You showed us what I consider just an incredible outcome of a pilot program on improving the performance on load conformance. And now I recognize February and March are not telling subjects or months that are going to change this. And you need to get through a summer to see how this is really working. But all that said, I'm just curious if you have looked at how it performed in the last 2 months, and did it kind of track along the same trends as providing that this has an opportunity to significantly reduce the load conformance?
Yes, I can elaborate on that, and happy to report that we have actually discussed this in a public forum just early this week in the Market Performance and Planning Forum that happened this Monday. And we indeed included this topic specifically. Just to give you the most recent information that we have, the pilot program effectively lasted all the way through the very first days of March. Once we moved into March, there were some operational conditions that require basically to go back to normal practices. You will see how the load conformance starts to increase after the first days of March. Now, based on the period that we have, that is effectively anywhere between the last days of December through February, we saw very promising results. Some metrics that we indicated is that the average load conformance that we used to have for the same time of the year for the peak time was about 1,400 megawatts. During the pilot program, that reduced to 50 megawatts. That's a significant reduction. And going from over 90% of utilization of the conformance, that came down to less than 1% of the time. So magnitude, frequency-wise, that was a very successful program. Now, the implications of having that, what it means really for the market. We start looking into the prices, into the cost, into how much flexibility may have been lost for operators to balance the system. And everything is looking promising because first, it helped to converge the prices. It helped to converge the transfers that were expected from the 15-minute market to the 5-minute market. And it actually reduced the cost for the real time. So all these are good indices. Now it is a matter of how we can assess this to keep moving into more stringent months such as the summer, where we have other factors to consider.
Guillermo, thank you, and I look forward to the next opportunity at the appropriate time when you have the update on this. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Any further comments or questions? Severin?
Thanks, Guillermo. This was really interesting. I have a few questions. On slide 8, the curtailment, batteries are sort of pushing against solar, and we would expect this to go down as batteries come in relative to solar, right?
There is a very intuitive expectation once we start integrating storage resources. The natural profile of storage resources is to arbitrage energy from the midday hours into the evening. Right. That is when we have excess of supply in the middle of the day. So we would expect that by integrating more and more storage resources, the oversupply condition would be mitigated or reduced because now you can absorb that energy through the storage resources. Once you consider congestion in the mix, everything becomes blurry because it doesn't matter if you have just a matter of oversupply, it matters where the resource is located. Right. So that's the reason that you can see that even though oversupply may look much lower for this year, congestion is still making most of the reductions because still it is the location that matters for when they have to move around.
Does that suggest that the batteries are not going in at the points of very large solar capacity?
It is very interesting because, let me step back. When we refer to congestion, there may be this intuition that we are talking about very local congestion, that there may be just one small transmission line that has some solar resources stranded. In general, it's not that type of congestion. We have major transmission elements in the system, like the backbone of Pad 15, Pad 26 that are in the center of the system. When that constraints are binding, effectively splits the system in north and south. A half of the generation is going to move down, a half of the generation is going to move up. And it really doesn't matter in what part of the south the battery is going to be located, because as long as it is below or above the constraint, it's going to move like anybody else. So it's not just very localized congestion, it's even more regional congestion.
Great. And then my other question is on slide 5. You said you'd expect this to be less than 100% because it's a hedge, but this got me confused about which side. So the selling side of this is an LSE, right?
It could be explicitly a low serving entity. No, let me clarify. In the congestion revenue right auction that we have implemented, there are buy and sell options. They can buy or they can sell. They can sell if they have something, they own the transmission right. Those that can sell could be low serving entities, could be any other type of entity that holds a CRR. And that typically happens because they can buy something in the annual process, and they can come into the monthly process and
Okay.
sell that. Doesn't necessarily has to be just load serving entities.
And then the buy side, but it's mostly load serving entities, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay.
And
the
there is an
buy,
increasing volume of capacity being sold from the allocation process, yes.
and the buy side is mostly generators?
It is a mix. It's financial participants and generators. There may be very low participation from low serving entities, but it is also a mix.
So I'm trying to understand which side is hedging. I would think both sides are hedging. Is that not right? Or it's one side?
It may also have to do with how the contract is organized. I would say that in general, we can see marketers, for instance, buying CRRs to hedge their position. There could be some low-serving entities that use the auction to balance their portfolio. They can be selling CRRs and buying others. And there could be financial participants trying to take a position on the auction.
Okay, when I teach about futures markets in my classes, I talk about hedging, but since both sides of the market are hedging, there's no particular reason to think that the price wouldn't be reflect the expected value of the transaction, that there wouldn't be a systematic bias. But you think that there is a systematic bias that you'd expect the transaction price to be less than 100% of the payout on average, which suggests that the sell side is the hedge, is getting the value of the hedge, and therefore is willing to sell for less than the expected value. Am I understanding that right? I'm just trying to...
Let me answer in this way because we have seen many different dynamics in the system. On one end, we have the dynamics of those entities selling transmission rights. And it could be for whatever reason it happens to be. It could be to rebalance their portfolio if they are low-serving entities. It could be for arbitrage when they buy something in the annual and they sell something else in the monthly. And what we have seen is that, at least for the selling portion, there are some cases where once you go after the fact and analyze what the actual value of that transmission right is, you can conclude that it was underbid. Basically, they sold the CRRs for a discount because the value that that CRR is worth once you know the actual settlements is much higher than what they were willing to sell the CRR for. Another interesting metric that we have seen, for instance, is when you look at the success rate of selling the transmission right in the auction, is over 90%. That is a very strong indication that, well, they may be underselling the CRRs because if you are able to sell those so frequently at that success rate, maybe it's because it's underpriced. That is a very explicit dynamic that we have seen and reported in different forums related to congestion revenue rights. Regarding the buy side, I think the participation is mostly driven by financial participants. There are marketers as well. Low-serving entities may be in the very low range of participation for buying CRRs.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Severin. Any other comments in the room? Questions? I don't want to miss anyone. Going to get a bad reputation. I'm going too fast. All right, looks like we're good. Silas, can you check and see if there's any public comment?
For public comment, you can press the raise hand icon on Zoom or #2 on the phone. Okay, at this time, there's no Zoom comments.
Excellent. Thank you, Silas. And there are no comments in the room from the attendees. And we can now move to our next agenda item, which is our informational reports. And this is, we have submitted informational reports for the Department of Market Monitoring update and Market Surveillance Committee update. This is your opportunity, board and governing body, if you have any questions or comments on those. Seeing none on Zoom and none in the room, we can go to our next item, which is agenda item number 9, our future agenda items. And it's an opportunity if you have something you would like to suggest for a future meeting. As Rebecca has noted, which I think has never been done, but this would be your opportunity. Be a
did we need to do public comment on the informational reports?
Well, maybe. But given the track record, I guess I was overly optimistic. Let's go. There's none in the room, I'll tell you that. And Silas, let's check and see. Thank you, Rebecca. Let's check and see if there's any public comments online for our informational reports. Silas, agenda item number 8.
Checking online for public comment on informational reports, you can press the raise hand icon or #2. There are no public comments online.
As I predicted, but good to find out. Thank you, Rebecca. And our last agenda item is whether there's any requests for future agenda items. Seeing none, we can go to the last bullet point here, which is to adjourn the meeting. And thank you, everyone, and excellent presentations, and we appreciate all your time and attention.
And Roger, thank you. And Joe and Rebecca, thank you as well.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Rob. Appreciate it.